Welcome to Life by Design, episode 366. Welcome to Life by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Creasho Jug.
Happy to be here, as always.
Yeah, we are creators of Life by Design with many locations worldwide. Each week on the show, we discuss the principles and the practice of Life by Design. Today, we're talking about the relationship between allergies, C-section, and the prenatal diet. Basically, we're talking about the fact, and it is becoming more evident and more facts are piling up that what a woman does in the prenatal stage and even more so to some degree what she does in her life way before that and maybe even her mother's life has an effect on the health outcomes, in this case, allergies in the baby. And, we've talked about this before, Creasho, with, I believe it was looking at either in Sweden or Norway, where we're looking at multiple generations during times of fast or famine, and whether or not the grandparents, not just the parents, but the grandparents were born during a time of fast or famine had an impact on some of the outcomes, or there was a correlation between some of the outcomes in health with the actual grandchildren. So basically, for those who are not up to date on some of this, basic genetic information or epigenetic information. Basically, although genes are definitely a part of the puzzle, the way genes get expressed and their epigenome are a big part of the puzzle. So we can change things by how we live, the choices we make, and it can be passed down, which is really, really interesting. So, we think about how your parents ate and then how the grandparents ate, and we would assume that those things don't have any impact, but it's turning out that they do have an impact, and I think we'll just continue over the next many years to discover how significant that impact is.
You have a better memory than I do, because I don't remember talking about that. And this is one of those things where when I was reading this, I was getting upset. I'm like, I hate the fact that somebody else's choices dictate or have a, and I guess this is just life, and yeah. I'm kind of opening up the fact that I'm a bit of a control freak, but I was upset that the other people's choices have a bearing on my health.
It's true.
But it's true. It looks like it's true,
But at the same time, maybe this is more than the example I'm going to give, but somebody could drive a car into, somebody could do something to. So in many ways, we do have to be, interconnected. Unless you're going to live off the grid in a GERT, then, you're a yurt, sorry. Shows my ignorance about living off the grid. Sorry for those people who are living in a yurt, although you probably don't have this podcast. So, yeah, we are subject to other people, and in this case, maybe even more so because it is being passed down in the genetic lineage or epigenetics, as we're talking about here today. So, the study we're talking about is actually two. One was looking at medical charts of two studies, I believe, right? 158 and 422 children. They looked at the types or the amount of allergic.
158,422 charts of children.
Oh my goodness. I thought you had two studies, 158 and 422. Okay, my goodness.
There's two studies, one looking at that and then one looking at rates of those are cesarean sections, and then there's
Gotcha.
And the other one, one of them is cesarean sections. One of them is maternal diet.
I have it here in front of us. And guys, we'll put the links to the studies in the show notes at lifebydesign.com/podcast. Find today's episode, and you can go read these articles or studies for yourself. But 158,000 medical charts looking at the number of conditions, food allergies, eczema, asthma, hay fever, and then the method of delivery, and looking for a correlation between the children who had vaginal deliveries and those who had cesarean section and the amount of allergies. And so what was found is a correlation between those people who had a cesarean section and the number of allergies. I think the take home is a couple things. I want to make a couple statements here, and there's some caveats, obviously, for those people listening in. If you've had a cesarean section, this is not an indictment of the fact that you had a cesarean section. We're all for medical care properly placed at the right time in a way that's going to be helpful and save lives. And done properly, it's a procedure that, can do that. Do I think that the cesarean rates of 25, 30% and above match up with the requirement for cesarean sections in the average population? No, I don't, because there are countries that have high levels of, they're industrialized countries with much lower levels of cesarean section. So once again, North Americans generally lead the way in some of these unhealthy health statistics. But if it was necessary, it was necessary. So there's no problem there. Are there some ways that you can improve the potential negative effects of cesarean section? Yes, there is. We'll talk about those on today's show, and how, if you have had a cesarean section, some of the things you should do for your children in order to maximize their immune system function. But I think the take home, and then I'll pass it back to you, Cratio, to talk about the second study. The take home is really, there's a relationship between bypassing the normal mechanisms for the body and the body working the way that it's supposed to work. And it just seems to me that the more and more studies that pile up, not just in this area, but when you bypass normal innate mechanisms, you're out for a potential negative effect.
Yeah. So two things. I don't know. It strikes me weird, the term normal. I would rather use adaptive mechanisms, right? This is what we've been used to for millions of years.
Sure.
And the other thing that, because I wrote the notes and there was a lot of data to get on there. In the same study, they noted similar effects for children who are breastfed. Or supplemental breastfed, meaning if you breastfeed exclusively or if you supplement with breast milk, there's less of it appears to be a correlation with less allergies.
Right. So are we saying then in this study that it could be one or the other, a combination of both? So we're not specifically saying cesarean section versus vaginal birth then?
I think they are, I have to, because it's been like a week since I read the study. I think they're just saying there is a positive correlation with less allergies if you are naturally delivered or mom breastfed or supplemented with breastfeeding.
Gotcha.
That's all they could say. Yeah.
And again, a lot of these studies we're looking at correlation, but you start piling up enough of these things over and over again, those correlations get stronger and stronger. And I think they bear paying some attention to. The second study you looked at had 1,300 women in it, and they were recording their diet during pregnancy. We know there's some flaws with that in terms of, food diaries and logs and recall. So, the amount of food measurements. So it's not perfect by any means, but found that mothers with poor dietary diversity, which I'll have you define what that means, along with the history of the allergies, were more likely to develop eczema or food allergies. So again, relationships between what the mom's eating, relationships between the mother's health and what we're seeing in the health profiles of the children that are born.
Yeah, again, I would love to define the terms. I had trouble. This is why we're saying some of this. It was hard to find the actual studies. I always like to read the actual studies. I read the summary that was given to us on the American Allergies Institute. I think these were presented there. So terms like, dietary diversity, it sounds like it could be a politically correct term for probably eating more real food would be my assumption, or eating, a variety of different types of food, not sticking within. But again, I don't necessarily know. Right. The important thing is, and there's a couple of things with diet that we don't really argue about, like eating vegetables and eating real food. It seems like no matter what data you're reading, the more real food that people are eating, the better it's going to be. And the purpose of us talking about this today is to get people to understand that the food that you eat does matter. It impacts not only your health, there's a correlation between your health, your percentage of, or your likelihood of developing allergies is what they're saying, and the likelihood that your children are going to develop the same allergies as you.
Yes, I think that the relationship is what's important, and elevating it in terms of your value systems, right? Oh, no big deal. Oh, it doesn't matter.
Right.
I'm not
Everything
saying don't.
In moderation.
Yeah, well, we should come back to that podcast again soon. But it's one of those things where we're not saying don't go off track. We're not saying we don't go off track. We're simply saying that it matters, and it matters enough that you have to be aware of it, and that you have to be willing to accept the consequences of the choices that you make. And in this case, those choices are having a consequence on your littles. And, for lots of parents, and this is no judgment, they probably value their children's health more than their own. And so if that's the case, then it makes sense to me that you're putting special emphasis on what you do, how you take care of your body, especially if you're planning on having children or if you are pregnant. And then, of course, as the children are growing and developing, we want to make sure that they're fed well, that they're taken care of, and that those things matter, and they matter enough that we need to pay attention to them.
I can't say it any better than that.
Okay, well, don't.
I won't. Take that.
Guys, you can go to the show notes. We've got a copy of the Eat by Design ebook in there. You can jump in on the free 30-day Eat by Design challenge. You get 30 days of videos and learn more about Eat by Design, how to apply that for yourself and your family. And thank you, as always, for following Life by Design and joining the drive to 1 million families living life by design.